Chapter 5 Recall. The journey across Sky Island was far more exhausting than Link had anticipated. For one, he ended up needing to dive off one island and onto another shortly after leaving the construct. Rauru had encouraged him to try this himself, but ultimately Link convinced the spirit to aid him. It wouldn't do to break his neck up here, mere hours from reuniting with Zelda. He also encountered more of the soldier constructs, which seemed more active the closer he got to the Temple of Time. Even with his newly forged sword, they were more than a handful to deal with, mostly because of their armor. So he handled things the way Purah always claimed he did, mostly by beating on the machines until they broke. He found that interrupting the stream of energy from a construct's torso to its limbs was a good method to disrupt them, which gave him openings to land more critical strikes. In the end, Link amassed 2 more of the Zonai energy swords and a spear that he used as a makeshift walking staff. He also found a wooden shield on one of them, which he gladly relieved its broken owner of. But the effort was taxing. Even though the trip to the Temple of Time was only a few miles at most, he found that he needed to take breaks often. Sweat dripped down his brow in heavy rivulets, and his clothing remained damp, despite the afternoon sun overhead. There was a cool headwind that blew across the island, both helping cool Link, but also slowing him down further. He figured that he was, maybe, a mile from the temple when he took what he hoped to be his final break. He wanted to keep going, but the prospect of encountering more of the constructs gave him purpose. He figured Zelda could wait a few extra minutes. He removed the Purah pad from his waist, looking down at it thoughtfully. He hadn't taken the time to inspect it since retrieving it from the construct, so excited was he to see Zelda again. But now he turned it on, watching the Sheikah eye appear and then disappear, replaced by a handful of icons on a black background. There were only a couple of icons now, and Link found that he wished some of the older icons were available. Maroon, certainly, would have come in handy against the constructs, as would stasis. But those, like the vast majority of other Sheikah equipment, had ceased working when Zelda and the Sheikah shut down the ancient technology. It was the right decision, in Link's mind, considering the threat that the Yiga clan posed with their technological advances, as well as the possibility of other threats. He knew how badly Zelda had lamented that decision, comparing herself to the king of old, but they also experienced just how destructive that technology was when co-opted by evil intent. There wasn't a soul in Hyrule alive today who didn't bear the physical or mental scars from the calamity, either from its first emergence or through the final battle against it and its minions. But Purah's machinations would never have stopped there. The day after the technology was shut down, she had already begun work to salvage what she could to build along a new path that she claimed would have security from outside influence in mind from the start. She rebuilt the Sheikah slate from the ground up, salvaging components from the old ones, and had gifted Zelda with it 1 year after the shutdown. At the time, it only had the camera and rudimentary map runes, but it was something. Since then, Purah had been hard at work, he knew. How that woman managed so many projects, he would never know, though he was aware that she had recruited several other Sheikah as research assistants and project leads. Robbie and Jaren, the husband and wife pair of researchers, who had helped Link so much during his fight against the Calamity, had been folded in, as well as several other protégés. The Purah pad in its current state only had 4 runes: the camera, the gallery, the telescope, and the map. All of them had been improved and iterated upon since their creation. Link first pressed the gallery, both curious and wary of what he might find, but surprisingly found only photographs he knew about. There were photos from before he and Zelda ventured below ground, as well as pictures from their journey. There were photos of the Zonai statues, and the final image was that of the large mural they had discovered. Frowning, Link exited the gallery and attempted to access the camera, but the room seemed to be non-functioning. As soon as he pressed it, the pad went dark, rebooting itself. When it turned back on, a line of text scrolled across the screen. Check it. The camera rune is broken. What did Link do this time? Bring it to me and I'll fix it up. He rolled his eyes, smirking. Leave it to Purr to find ways to ridicule him, even in the machines she made. He moved on to the map, bringing up a detailed map of Hyrule. It did not seem to know where he was, however, as the dot that usually signified his location was missing. It's surprising, considering I'm up in the sky. He wouldn't be surprised if Purr decided to send some of her minions up to some of the Sky Islands somehow. If these were to stay in the skies over Hyrule, he suspected she would want to map them out, start researching the old technology here. He noticed with some satisfaction that he could see the handful of permanent teleportation locations that Purr had established. There was one in central Hyrule, in the small settlement that had sprung up as a hub for ongoing building efforts across the region, as well as ones in Hateno and Kakariko Village. As long as the Purr pad's teleporting functionality still worked, Link should have a way off this island. Like everything related to the ancient Sheikah, the ability to teleport across Hyrule in an instant had stopped working. Each of the Sheikah shrines had gone dark, their travel pads inactive, just as they had been before, and Purr had made it a priority to find a way to recreate that technology. Only very recently had she finally achieved the breakthrough she needed. Unfortunately, there was no option to reactivate the old shrines and the old transport network that Link had helped create. Instead, Purr had managed to craft more portable teleportation points that could be placed and activated. Rauru, did Zelda ever show you this? He turned to look at the Zonai spirit, but frowned when he didn't see him anywhere nearby. Rauru? Link stood, frowning deeply. Rauru! I'm here. Rauru reappeared, seeming to fade back into existence. He reached up, placing a hand against his head, though, and looked confused. Where were you? Link asked, both relieved and concerned by Rauru's reappearance. I don't know. Rauru met Link's eyes. We were traversing together, and then I was here. He looked at the Temple of Time. I do not think I was gone for long. That you were gone at all is... Are you all right? Rauru's expression grew weary. It is like I said, Link. My time grows short. I suspect my consciousness is beginning to fade as my connection to your arm weakens. To hear that pained Link. But he had enough experience with spirits to have at least some understanding of what Rauru meant. He clipped the Purr pad back to his belt and stood, grabbing up the Zonai spear. Then we'd better keep going. I'm sure Zelda will wish to say goodbye as well. The Temple of Time towered over Link, with each of its 4 tiers larger than the one beneath it, creating a structure that appeared far too top-heavy to be stable. This was especially true, since much of it seemed to float in the air, off to the side of the Sky Island. The underside featured multiple inverted stone spires, although some had crumbled, exposing metallic rods within. According to Rauru, it was these rods that allowed the Temple of Time to hover as it did. Link would likely discover similar spires and rods beneath all the floating islands. Getting up to the entrance of the temple was a challenge, largely due to the stairs leading up to it having crumbled. Thankfully, the broken stone hadn't been a difficult climb for Link, and soon he stood before the doors, winded but pleased. The massive 2-story doors were primarily made of the same white stone that the rest of the temple was, with Zonai text etched into it on both sides. Various other designs were present too, swirls, circles, and one large golden eye. At eye level, however, split between the 2 doors, was a large circle of green stone, surrounded by a gold ring. As Link approached the doors, the same glowing projection of the Zonai eye and hand symbol appeared, overlaying the circle of stone beneath. Link exhaled slowly, approaching the door, looking down at his left hand. He wondered what Zelda would think when she saw it. Doesn't matter, he thought, smiling, and then placed his hand up to the projection. Just like before, the projection flashed, a pulse of light originating from under his hand and pulsing out, dissolving the projection as the light passed. He waited, and then he heard a loud click from somewhere within. The two doors began to part slowly, dust cascading down as they opened. Inside was a lavish, open room with a ceiling that stretched up multiple floors. Most everything appeared to have been carved from white marble, except for places that were accented with gold or other colors. There was a walkway that led up a flight of stairs to a raised section, and on the other side of the stairs were tiered fountains, water splashing down in streams. Link walked up the stairs expecting to see Zelda appear at any moment. But when he got to the top, he still couldn't see her. The upper level, however, was unique in its own right. A pair of the wheels like he'd seen earlier in the building he'd woken up in sat side by side, while a third one sat between them and perpendicular to the other two, all spinning in time with each other. Lanterns made with the closed lotus flower design cast a pale light around the chamber. In the center of the room, upon a raised plinth, there was a white altar, and floating above the altar was a giant, tear-shaped stone, which glowed with golden light. It had a design etched into it that Link didn't recognize. "Zelda?" Link called, opening his mouth to ensure he could be heard throughout the chamber. "Zelda?" Rauru floated into the chamber with Link and gasped softly. Link looked back at him, eyebrows lifted. "What?" Rauru floated closer to the altar and the stone. "The sacred stone of time." Link looked at the Zanai, and then at the floating stone. He stepped closer to him, frowning at it. "You've mentioned the sacred stones before, but you didn't tell me what they are." "They are powerful artifacts of my people. They each have the power to amplify the power their possessor has. In my time, we called such individuals sages." "And you said that Zelda was the Sage of Time." "Yes." "And this is the Sacred Stone of Time?" Rauru glanced at Link. "Yes. And notably, it still bears her markings. It is still bonded to her. She is alive, Link." Link's heart thudded in his chest at those words, and he looked back up at the sacred stone. He hesitantly reached up, placing his hand against its surface, finding it cool to the touch. Then, the stone flashed, and Link was bathed in its golden white light. When the light faded, and he could see again, he no longer stood in the Temple of Time's inner chamber. The altar was there, but everything else was white fog. And Zelda was there. She floated in the air before the altar, eyes closed, hands clasped over her breast, in a supplicating position. She was dressed in unfamiliar clothing, a green dress with white layers, an elaborate tabard down the front, covered in Zanai iconography and golden tassels, a pair of glass earrings that looked like lotus lamps, a necklace, bracelets, and even a circlet across her forehead, with the Zanai eye emblazoned in its center. From her necklace hung the golden sacred stone, now a much smaller size. "Zelda?" Link said, taking a step forward, eyes wide, but he hesitated when she didn't respond. He swallowed and spoke again. "Zelda? You're here. Are you alright?" Again, she didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed and her face passive. He noticed what looked like white teardrops that had been either painted or tattooed onto her face beneath her eyes. "Zel, please. What's going on? What is this?" Finally, she moved. She lowered her hand, holding it out towards him as if waiting for him to take it. Her eyes were closed, and she didn't say a word. Link hesitated, looking at her hand, before he stepped forward and reached out, gently taking it in his own. Her hand was soft and warm and real. She was real. Link wrapped his fingers around her hand, and after a moment gently tugged on her arm. He didn't know why she was floating there, why she wasn't responding, but he wanted to bring her from this place, to pull her into his arms. But she didn't move. She remained resolutely in place, and though the bangles on her arms jingled with Link's attempts to move her, she gave no outward response. But her hand was warm and growing warmer. The light from her sacred stone pulsed, and then her entire body began to shine before the glow coalesced behind the stone. The light traveled over to her shoulder and down her arm towards their linked hands. "Please tell me what's going on," Link said, eyes on the glowing light approaching their clasped hands. "Say something." She didn't. But the light continued down her wrist and into her hand. And then it passed from her hand into Link's, causing his Zonai arm to shine with her golden hue. Her hand loosened in his, and he reluctantly let it go, inspecting his arm. The light concentrated on the back of his hand, in the place that Rauru's sacred stone had once sat. There was a pulse of power and warmth that washed over Link's arm and body. Then it faded, and the only sign of its presence was a new etching that had appeared on the bracer. It was the same symbol that had been on the giant sacred stone. Zelda's symbol. "I don't understand," Link said, looking back up at her. Her hand had returned to its place, clasping her other hand. Her eyes were closed, her body was rigid, still floating a foot or so off the ground. And then she began to fade. "No!" Link reached out to grab her arm, but his hand passed right through her. His heart raced as he tried again, but it was no use. She faded from view, and so too did the misty room. In moments he was back in the chamber at the heart of the Temple of Time. The sacred stone was gone. Zelda was gone. "Damn it," he said, slamming his fist down onto the stone altar. "God damn it!" He felt Rauru's presence beside him, but the Zonai waited several moments before speaking, waiting for Link's initial outburst to pass. "I'm sorry, Link." Link turned from the altar, clenching his fists tightly enough that he thought he might draw blood with his sharp nails. "Did you see her?" "Yes. As soon as you touched the sacred stone, I saw and felt her presence, though I was unable to approach. I believe that the vision was to be for you alone." "What was it?" "I felt her hand." "I'm not sure." Rauru rubbed his jaw. "I've never seen power manifest in that way before. The closest would be my sister's power, but this was different. It made me think of an echo, a projection of Zelda's will. But passing on her power like that..." "Passing on her power? What do you mean?" "Do you not feel it? Zelda somehow passed her power as the Sage of Time to you, without giving you her sacred stone. I've never seen anything like it." Link lifted his hand and gazed at the symbol on the back of his wrist. He could feel it, now that Rauru drew attention to it. There was a new reservoir of power within him, but somehow familiar and unfamiliar. It was a foreign sensation, yet it was also distinctly Zelda. "What is it? What can I do with it?" he asked, trying to wrap his head around the new sensation. Rauru hummed thoughtfully. "I'm not sure, but one of the most common uses I saw Zelda use was an ability she called Recall." He lifted his ghostly left hand, looking at the back of his wrist. Link could see that the etching of Zelda's symbol had appeared there, mirroring Link's physical hand. It allowed her to reverse an object's passage in time. The Zonai must have seen something of the confusion Link felt on his face, for he chuckled. "I truly wish I could tell you more, but I do not know much else. Zelda and Zonai could use the ability to cause objects to reverse their motion." "What do you mean?" Rauru contemplated his answer for a time. "Imagine someone throws a knife at you. The recall, you could cause the knife to fly back to the one who threw it, or reverse its position back to its previous point in time." Link tried to picture it in his head, and even attempted to see it for himself, dropping his wooden shield to the ground and trying to use his new ability. Nothing happened. He could comfortably pick it up telekinetically, but that wasn't all what Robert had described. Yet, try as he might, he couldn't quite figure out how to activate this new power available to him. I suppose it may take time for you to get a feel for it. I recall Zelda struggling with it at first, even after inadvertently sending herself back through time. Link looked up. Wait, could I do that too? Send myself back to your time, back to see Zelda? Rauru frowned. I do not know, Link, but it would be unwise. Ganondorf has awoken in your time, and I can only imagine the destruction he has planned now that he is free. Zelda believed that you were the greatest hope Hyrule had to defeat him. Responsibility settled down into Link's shoulders like an old familiar coat, heavy and unwieldy, yet something he was more than accustomed to. He grimaced, looking down at his hand again. I don't know, Zel. I can barely walk a mile without needing to stop for a breather, and the Master Sword shattered in seconds against that monster. I need more than a few mystical powers. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He'd had many of the same doubts when presented with the task of freeing the four divine beasts and destroying Calamity Ganon. Prevailed then, with the help of his allies, and he wouldn't let himself dwell on his fears now, not when he still knew so little. For a time he stood there, eyes closed. The cogs and the mechanisms in the Temple of Time formed a cacophony that at first formed a dull buzz in the background of his mind. Stone on stone, water lapping in pools, and the sound of wind whistling through the structure. But as he stood there, he began to realize that it wasn't one steady sound. It had a subtle but steady rhythm. The sound seemed to ebb and flow again and again at the same intervals. Like a clock. A Temple of Time, he thought, distantly amused. Immersed in the flow of time, he reached out towards the shield on the ground again. He could feel its place not only in space, but in time. It was there, moving right alongside him, ever forward, and yet... His arm pulsed bright and gold, and the shield stopped, and reversed. An outside observer likely would have never seen the change. The shield had been sitting on the ground for several minutes now. But Link could see it. He could feel the flow of time reverse around the shield. Though it was not without resistance, time, it would seem, had a current, much like that of a river. But Link pushed, and the shield continued in its backwards path. It lifted from the ground briefly before settling back down, a reverse of Link's experiments with telekinesis. It sat for a time longer, and then, suddenly, it popped back up into the air, hanging there right where it had been when Link had dropped it. He settled his arm into it, wrapping his hand around the grip, and released his hold of it in time. There was something like an elastic band snapping back into place, a release as the shield gained weight and momentum again, and time reasserted its hold on it. Link released a heavy breath, eyes wide as he looked down at the shield on his arm. He'd done it. He used the recall ability. Zelda's ability, and more than that. For the briefest of moments, he thought he'd heard her voice calling out to him. Zelda? He turned his head, looking for the source of the whisper he knew he had heard. Link. There it was again, a whisper in the air, barely audible among the sounds of the massive clockwork structure. He could hear it, all the same, like a voice in his soul. He stilled, eyes half closed, listening, searching. Please, he thought, please be here. As he listened, he heard the faint tingling of bells. Rauru floated up beside him, ears perked as he looked to Link. What is it? He asked. Link shook his head, holding up a finger to forestall the Zonai. He felt something. It drew him as if he were a fish caught by a hook. As he focused on the sensation, he thought the sensation originated from his arm, his Zonai hand. And whatever it was, it pulled him ever forward. Behind the altar, and raised above the water wheels, was another tiered floor in the open chamber. Twin staircases on either side of the altar led up to the higher landing, where the room ended in a wall and a pair of massive white stone doors. The circular dragon symbol that Link had seen earlier was emblazoned across the two doors in gold and green trim. That was where he felt drawn to. Something beyond that door beckoned him, and without thinking he began to climb the stairs. Zelda? He thought, his heart racing. Rauru had called her earlier appearance an echo, a projection. Could she be calling to him now from wherever she was? Could Link somehow reach her with the power she granted him, pull her back? He heard Rauru follow, bells tinkling in the silent wind. They sounded distant, though. Link barely noticed. He climbed the stairs, past the 3 water wheels, and then stood before the doors. Gold trim lined the inside edges of the doors, and he could see a sliver of daylight peeking through the gap between them. He approached, looking up at the stone, daunted by their massive size, and yet, below the dragon's symbol was the eye symbol, and within it, on either side of the golden iris, were a pair of Zonai handprints. Link placed his hands on these, one Hylian and one Zonai, and pushed. At first the door didn't budge, and he gritted his teeth, leaning into it, pressing with all his strength and weight. His muscles strained, his shoulders ached, and his calves burned. His left arm throbbed, and he curled his fingers, scraping his pointed fingernails against the stone. Finally, the stone shifted the slightest amount, and then the doors began to pull away from Link, opening wide of their own accord. He gasped and nearly stumbled, righting himself and standing back up straight as the sliver of light grew, and a powerful gust of air blew in from the opening. Beyond the door was a long stone path that extended out, beyond the Temple of Time structure, into the open air. At the end of the path was another shallow staircase leading up through a stone arch to a circular platform. There, Link thought, that's where I need to go. He didn't know what he would find, or why that pulling sensation within him drew him to that place. But he knew he must go. He took a step forward. Link, Rauru said from just behind him. Wait. He turned to look back and found the Zonai floating just within the temple, his hair seeming to blow in the wind. He was fading. Blue-green particle-like motes of dust floating from him into nothing. Rauru. Link stepped back into the temple, reaching towards the spirit. Enter my arm again. I'm sure that we could find a way. No. The words stopped Link short, but Rauru's face was calm and patient. He smiled. My time has come, Link. I do not fear it. Link closed his fingers into a fist and allowed his arm to drop. He tried to form words, but none came to his lips. He had been here before, watching an old spirit pass from this world to the next, and just like then, he knew he was powerless to stop it. It is quite all right, Rauru said, gazing down at his left arm. It grew increasingly insubstantial and translucent. The pointed nails at his fingertips had all but dissolved. I have lived a very long time. I do not regret my decision to seal Ganondorf, and only wish I had the foreknowledge to do so sooner, before... He trailed off, eyes lifting to look out at the open sky. He smiled again, even as his feet and hands faded away. It is a relief to be finished. Though, I am sorry for the burden you must carry. There's so much I don't know, Link said. He destroyed the Master Sword. How am I supposed to face that? How can I defeat him? Rauru turned his gaze once more to Link. Zelda believed in you, Link. She never wavered in that belief, as long as I knew her. And you are exactly as she said. I've done all I can for you and her. I believe she has a plan, a way to see it done. Her presence here, granting her power to you. It all speaks to her wisdom. A lump grew in Link's throat as Rauru continued to fade. He tried to think of something to say, one last question to ask. A dozen came to mind, but ultimately he chose none of them. Thank you for giving me this chance, Rauru. I won't forget your sacrifice. Rauru's smile grew, eyes twinkling, even as he faded out of sight. Though our time together was brief, I'm so happy to have finally met you. Zelda's confidence in you is well placed, my friend. Link watched as motes of light faded into nothing. Rauru was gone. The light that had emanated from Link's arm as the Zanai spoke faded. And he was left alone once more. He exhaled shakily and looked at his hand and then around, spotting a golden leaf that had blown in through the open door. He reached out to it, focusing, and the leaf suddenly lifted into the air, floating into his waiting palm. The power granted to him by Rauru was still present, despite his spirit's departure. He released the leaf, allowing it to drift into the Temple of Time on the breeze, before he walked back out into the sunlight. Emotions roiled with him, fear, despair, and pain mixed with a spark of hope. He still felt that pull, and though he couldn't hear her voice, it seemed to him that Zelda was calling. As he walked, he looked to the side of the path and saw nothing but clouds on the ground far below. The stone beneath his feet felt sturdy and stable, but the further out he walked, the more the wind buffeted him from all directions. It swirled around him, sending his loose hair flying. He was careful to stay in the center of the path, lest he stumble and fall over the edge. The further he went, the stronger and more familiar that pull became. His heart beat a rapid cadence in his chest as he mounted the stairs, crossing beneath the stone arch, and walked out onto the circular platform at the end. The only thing he found, however, was a small, unadorned stone bench. It was rectangular and stood only waist high. It was long enough that he could have lain on it, and he suspected he knew its purpose. It looked not at all unlike a ceremonial bier, upon which a body would be displayed for funeral rites before entombment. It unsettled Link greatly that this was where he felt called to. For several seconds there was silence, save for the wind rushing around him. Then even that sound stopped. Link gasped as the air grew still and the wind ceased. And before him, just above the bench, an orb of warm golden light burst into being. At the same time, the back of Link's hand, where the symbol of Zelda's power had been etched into his bracer, began to glow with the same bright light. "Zelda?" Link said, hesitantly reaching out to the source of light over the bench. He felt warmth there, and familiarity. It felt like Zelda, yet it wasn't her. There was something else, another presence that he thought he should know. The light pulsed, and he again felt that pulling sensation. The presence seemed to speak, but there were no words, and he didn't understand. He opened his mouth to respond anyway, but then another presence joined his mind. This one he knew. He gasped as he felt the Master Sword rouse, as if from a deep slumber. He felt the spirit within, weak, damaged, confused, yet alive. He pulled the sword free, heart thudding in his chest as their minds touched. As always, it did not speak to him in words, but in sensations and intent. "Let go," it seemed to say to him. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't understand why the sword woke now, nor why it wished him to place it in that light. But if the Master Sword could be helped, if it could be healed, he would do whatever it requested. Hesitantly, he stretched out his hand, holding the Master Sword up towards the light. His Dani hand shone even brighter as it approached the orb of brilliance. Once more, he was struck by the familiarity of the presence, yet it was different, all the same. It made him think of Zelda, but it also seemed to reflect the spirit of the Master Sword. His power, unlike anything he had felt before. He released the Master Sword, and the sword remained in the air, suspended before his eyes. He withdrew his hand slightly, watching with wide eyes as the golden light expanded around the sword, enveloping it. Please, he thought, desperate. And, in response, he thought he felt a sense of purpose in the Master Sword, purpose and determination. The light pulsed one last time, as did Link's hand. And then the Master Sword was gone. He cried out, lunging forward, but his fingers found only empty air. The glow from both the spot over the bench and his hand faded. His fingers closed into a fist, and he released a snarl of anger, slamming both of his hands down on the stone bench. Bring it back! Give it back to me! He couldn't feel the Master Sword in his mind any longer. The golden presence, likewise, was gone. The wind blew freely around him, whipping his hair about and howling in his ears. He pounded the stone bench again and again, causing pain to flare up in his arms. But he didn't care. Everything was wrong. Everything had gone wrong. Zelda had disappeared, the Master Sword had been broken, and even his own highly accursed arm had been taken from him. He screamed in frustration, closing his eyes tightly while pressing his palms to the bench. He felt tears forming in the corner of his eyes, and he bared his teeth in a grimace of agony. A bellowing roar rent the air, and Link's eyes shot back open. He whirled, stumbling and sitting down hard on the bench, as from beneath the clouds just below the floating island, a dragon rose high into the air. It was the same dragon that he had seen before, golden-maned with blue crystal formations along its back, 6 legs, each ending in long claws. Its body undulating as it rose from the clouds, its long tail appearing to stretch into eternity. And then finally, it was free of the clouds, continuing to climb high into the sky. Link watched in awe, but his reverie was broken as his Zanai arm flared with sudden, white-hot agony. He cried out, gripping his upper arm with his other hand. It felt much like before when Ganondorf's power had first consumed it, as if he had dipped his arm into liquid fire. Tears fell from Link's eyes as his arm seemed to writhe beneath his fingers, like worms crawling just underneath his skin. The pain lasted for nearly a minute, before finally fading. When his arm returned to feeling normal, Link's body was drenched in sweat, panted from exertion, and when he let go of his arm, there was already signs of bruising where he had been gripping it, a faint handprint in his bicep. His left palm bled from several small cuts where he had pierced it with his sharp nails. He breathed shakily, staring at the arm. The pain was gone, yet he could still feel the echoes of it. Fire, agony, a profound wrongness that lingered. This wasn't his arm. It had been grafted onto him. He would use it, but he knew it wasn't his. And perhaps the arm knew it as well. Link. He shot to his feet, eyes wide. Zelda? He whirled, looking for the source of her voice. There was no denying it this time. He had clearly heard her this time. Zelda? Link, you must find me.